Hi, what if you were already free? What if you were already whole, complete, and healthy? What if you've always been free, whole, complete, and healthy? What if you will always be free, whole, complete, and healthy? This is the teaching of all spiritual traditions, as well as quantum physics, that we exist in a no-time space. We exist in a hologram, an energetic field of energy that's holographic in shape, many dimensions, multidimensional, in which there is no real time. It's all happening right here and now. Quantum physics keeps demonstrating this, and all spiritual practice can also demonstrate this to you as well as the teachings. So what's the point of this? The point is, it's very practical to create this as a reality for yourself, a functioning ability, because then you can change the past, anything in the present, and anything in the future. What if we could always change what's going on with us now, what we think went on in the past, and what will occur in the future? You know, Einstein used to say about time that time is simply a convenient device for keeping everything from happening all at once. That if we didn't have the concept, the belief, the perceptual framework that we created deliberately, if we didn't have that perceptual framework of time, then we would just simply be here right now experiencing everything that we as one soul in all various lifetimes, dimensions, incarnations, we would just experiencing it all right now. Which, if you've had that experience, is a wonderful, wonderful, O-N-E, wonderful, full of oneness. It is a wonderful experience. And it's also fun to spread it out in time and space. I had a very direct experience of this reality about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I had my house built. And when I built my house, there was a laborer who said that he also built waterfalls, and would I like a waterfall in my backyard? Well, at that point, I was spending so much on the house, you know, another few $1,000s for a waterfall just felt like nothing. So I said, sure, build a waterfall. So he built this waterfall. I really love this waterfall. And one day I realized that I hadn't really gone out and spent much time just sitting there being with the waterfall. And there was this beautiful bench that he had made out of a big piece of granite. Here's the bench. And as I sat down on the bench, deciding to finally just bask in this experience of this environment that I'd created, I wanted it to be part Hawaii, part Sedona Canyon. And as I sat there in this, my beautiful backyard by this waterfall, I started to sense a feeling next to me. And this feeling was very familiar. It was like a deja vu. But for the first time that I can recall, I felt this familiar feeling. I knew what it was, but I had never felt it before, consciously, that I could remember. And as I sat there, I actually experienced myself shrink from a 6-foot man into like this little boy, like 7 or 8 years old. I could feel myself shrink. And then after I shrank, I was sitting there and experienced of being a small little boy. This energy next to me, this feeling, felt even bigger. And eventually I had the courage to look, and I looked over and looked up, and it was this 9-foot being, sitting down, but 9-foot being in ephemeral effervescent green. And it's the entity or the energy, the being that I call Pan, that evidently I was seeing and feeling and in touch with as a child. Because he felt very friendly, very loving, very, very familiar, like an old friend. And that was like, wow, you know, welcome back. It's so good to see you again and to feel you. Because he felt really good. Now to me, Pan is like life force, Chi. It's the God and Goddess in one. It's the energy that infuses all of life and makes everything alive and vibrant. So as I felt this energy and basking there with Pan, this old friend, he then took his hand and went like this toward the waterfall. And as I looked at the waterfall, I began to see sprites, or water fairies. And as I looked at them, they were 6 or 7 inches tall, playing on the water. They had little wings. And then he took his arm and moved it again over to the bushes on the side. And as he showed me these bushes, I began to see fairies in the bushes. Elves, fairies, gnomes. And as I saw them, I had the same feeling I had with Pan, that I had always seen these beings. I had always experienced, I had always been in touch. And I simply like lifted a shade, or you could say a veil. But at that point I had this very deep realization that they had never left me, I had never left them, that even as an adult, even doing business, even when I was in my most heavy emotions or my most busyness in the world, at every age of my life, I still was in touch with these beings. And it's why I enjoyed being in nature, because it made it even more stronger. However, I had not till that moment allowed myself to see or feel them again since I was a little child. But that recognition, that knowing that I had never, that the connection had never been severed, I just simply wasn't focusing on that dimension, on that frequency. I was feeling them on some level, and now in this moment sitting on this bench with Pan, I was tuning into or focusing on the frequency or dimension in which Pan existed, as well as the fairies, the elves, the gnomes, and the water sprites. And then I realized, oh my God, my God within, how many other realities am I concurrently in touch with? How many other aspects of my life, how many other experiences in life are actually right here, right now, that we just simply need to relearn how to fine-tune our awareness, our senses, our extrasensory perception, our focus into these various frequencies that we call past, future, other dimensions. It's all available right now, and you can learn how to shift your awareness into these frequencies. Why would we want to do this? Be in touch with all time, all experiences, all at once? Well, the very practical application is that you can change the past if you want to. You can also change the present and the future. So, for instance, the past. I've done a lot of experimenting with that because teaching workshops, having lots of private clients for decades, of course, people always have feelings coming up about wanting to change the past. Not only how they feel about it, but that things actually happened, that they made mistakes, that they did things that they feel were wrong or not very loving. And I've had lots of experience of actually being able to track this down and document whether we were able, I say we, but really they were able, or myself was able to actually change what happened in the past. And one of them was this woman at a workshop, she eventually, what surfaced were very deep, heavy feelings of regret, guilt, intense guilt, shame, strong self-judgment, because when she was a teenager, she had been driving her car and she crashed, and her best friend was in the passenger seat, and in that car crash her best friend died, and she had been carrying that sense of responsibility and self-judgment and guilt around with her whole life, until she showed up at my workshop. And she was about 40 years old, and it came up in spades, really strong. And so we played with it, with whatever current technique, tool I tried. I usually try many until one of them works with somebody. I'm sure you have some. If not, they're readily available. And so we did a shamanic journey. We felt feelings as energy. We used the Matrix Energetics 2-point. So I did everything in my little arsenal of how we can shift our feelings, our past, release those feelings, dissolve those old beliefs that we're holding, that old energy, and allow a new energy or a new story to come in. So we played with it for a full day, and she felt a lot better at the end of the day. Of course, she and everyone else were saying, well, you feel better now, but what happens when you go home? And besides, what can you do about the fact that you killed your best friend in that car accident? Well, that evening she went home to her motel because she was visiting from out of town, and her mother had called her, and out of the blue, but she talked to her mother, and her mother had said that it had mentioned this other woman's mother, that she'd run into her. And of course that brought the subject up, and so this woman asked her mother about how the mother felt, because that was the mother of the woman that had died in the girl that had died in the car accident. And as they discussed this, she discovered that not only had the mother of the girl that had died remembered the story differently, that this woman's own mother remembered it differently. And the mother said, well, dear, you really shouldn't feel guilty because you had nothing to do with it. You weren't driving. She was driving. So all of a sudden she realized that her mother's memory and the girl who had died, that girl's memory, of her mother's memory, was that the girl who died was driving, and that this girl who was feeling guilty was in the passenger seat. So of course she didn't argue with her mother. She was rather shocked and surprised. So then the next day she told me that. So we went and we looked up the newspaper accounts of that car accident. In those days, they were still on something called microfilm, if you remember that. But we went to the library, looked up on microfilm, the local newspaper, and right on the front page was, the next day was the car accident. And sure enough, it listed this girl as the passenger and the girl who had died as the driver. Now we printed that out, and the girl just sat with it for quite a while, most of the day, because it took for a while for her to realize that the past had shifted. The past had shifted in a way that made it easier for her to deal with the feelings about the whole accident. Obviously, much easier. She was still sad that her friend had died, but she no longer felt responsible or guilty that she had caused the accident or caused her friend's death. I have explored many other ways of tracking and checking documentation, and this is something you can do. I don't suggest you take my word for this. Experiment. Try it out. Take your feelings about a past experience and play with them in whatever technique or manner. Praying, forgiveness, letting go, releasing, shifting, transforming, using the breath, meditation, whatever ways you can to shift your energy around a certain subject. And then if possible, and it might just come out of the blue, you might be able to actually document it. Get in touch with old videos, pictures, photographs, eyewitness, newspaper accounts, the memories of you and your friends or the people involved. It can be very powerful to get documentation for yourself that convinces you that you have that ability to change the past. It's not necessary to forgive yourself and free yourself from a situation and the feelings around it, but it can be very helpful. And of course, in the present, it's much easier to shift your feelings because in a way we feel things are, in the present, we still accept that things are unfolding in the moment. What I'm suggesting is that things are unfolding in the moment for all time and space, for the past and the future. But right now, most of us accept that at this moment, if we release our feelings, if we change our point of view, if we change our behavior and our belief and our projection and our perceptual filters, that things can unfold differently. So this takes us to the future, talking about how can we change the future. Well, my sense of it, from asking that question my whole life, this is just in my world, but in my sense, I see that everything that happens in the future is a projection or a natural outflowing, according to the physics of the universe, the physics of spirit as well as science, that the future unfolds from our current awareness, our current beliefs, thoughts, and feelings. And from that awareness, from that consciousness, flows the actions and events of the future. So at any moment that you sense or fear or that something might happen in the future, if you go in with the same tools and approach of forgiveness, letting go, releasing, whatever works for you, and release those beliefs, those attitudes, those perceptual filters, you are in effect changing the future, the outcome of what could occur. One thing that's interesting, if you ask a lot of very advanced spiritual people about prophecies, they will say, well, the real purpose of a prophecy is to show you, or astrological reading, or a tea reading, or a tarot reading, or an intuitive. The real purpose of all of those ways of trying to divine the future is to show you what the future will most likely become if you stay in your current state of mind, if you stay in your current consciousness, with your current state of beliefs and attitudes and feelings. This is what most likely will occur. And that is meant as to be very helpful in that you can go in and change what you're funding, what you're energizing right now. So as I said, having this belief as a personal direct reality for yourself is very, very useful. It's very helpful. It's very practical. Because at any moment you can change the present, or the past, or the future. And you begin living in the eternal present, the eternal now. And I suggest that you play with this and experiment so that you can develop your own track record, so that you can track it instead of just trusting it, that you can use facts to build up your faith. And at some point, as you get your own personal direct evidence and belief that this is real, what I'm talking about, then that you have this ability, the more real it becomes for you, in my experience, the more real it becomes for you, the easier it is for you to do. And the more you're able to shift and change bigger and more profound, more significant and more charged aspects of your life. So if you like, you could just take a moment right now and ask, if I knew, in my knowing, if I knew how to open to developing this ability within myself, to live fully in the present, and to access my ability to shift and change in the present moment what I'm creating, here and now, and in every other level and dimension and time in which I exist. If I knew how to open and develop this ability, what would I do? And then let go and let God guide you. Let go and let your intuition or spirit guide you in whatever way you follow guidance, with signs, synchronicity, messages, and you will be led to experiences, to people, resources, opportunities, in which you'll develop your own personal direct evidence. And with that will come a greater and greater ability to be master of your own destiny, here and now and everywhere.